I live in a city that never sleeps, in a small apartment that I've slowly turned into my sanctuary, filled with plants and books on structural engineering. As a senior architectural designer at a prestigious firm, my life was my work, a portfolio of glass and steel structures that I was immensely proud of. I was the one who burned the midnight oil, the one who translated impossible client dreams into buildable realities. The story I'm about to tell you is about how a single, arrogant comment from my boss became the catalyst that dismantled his career and everything he thought he had built. It's a story about realizing your own worth and making sure everyone else does, too. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My world was one of precision and passion. At 31, I had dedicated nearly a decade of my life to Sterling Designs, a firm known for its cutting-edge, minimalist architecture. I wasn't just an employee. I was a true believer in our motto, building tomorrow's landmarks. I started as a junior intern, wide-eyed and fueled by caffeine and ambition. Over the years, I climbed the ladder, not through office politics or schmoozing, but through sheer, unadulterated hard work. My designs won awards that were collected by the firm, with my name mentioned in the fine print, a footnote in the story of my own success. My direct superior, David Chun, the head of operations, was a master of taking credit. He was charismatic, with a silver tongue and a smile that could disarm clients, but always felt predatory to me. He knew how to talk about architecture, but he hadn't sat down and wrestled with a blueprint in years. That was my job. For the past 2 years, my entire professional life had been consumed by a single project. The Illusion Grand, a luxury hotel commissioned by the notoriously demanding hotel magnate, Mr. Harrison. This wasn't just another building. It was set to be the crown jewel of the city's skyline, a spiraling tower of glass and sustainable technology. Mr. Harrison wanted a legacy, and I was the one tasked with designing it. The project was a beast. It involved complex structural challenges, innovative energy systems, and an aesthetic that had to be both timeless and revolutionary. I lived and breathed the Elysian Grand. I sketched its foundations on napkins during my lunch breaks. I solved complex engineering puzzles in my dreams, and I spent countless weekends in the office, surrounded by 3D models and endless cups of coffee. My social life had dwindled to occasional texts with my friend Sarah, a lead engineer at a collaborating firm who understood the pressures of the industry. She was the only one who truly grasped the sacrifices I was making. David, of course, was the face of the project. He was the one who presented my work to Mr. Harrison, his voice smooth and confident as he walked the client through models and renderings that I had spent hundreds of hours perfecting. He'd use phrases I had written in my design notes, passing them off as his own spontaneous insights. "You see, Mr. Harrison," he'd say, gesturing at a feature I had designed, "the way the light interacts with the western facade is a deliberate nod to neo-futurism." I would stand silently in the back of the room, the ghost in the machine, feeling a familiar mixture of pride and resentment. It was the way of the industry, I told myself. You pay your dues, you do the work, and eventually, you get the recognition you deserve. The final stages of the design phase were the most grueling. Mr. Harrison was a perfectionist, and his last-minute requests for changes were legendary. He wanted to revise the entire atrium layout just 6 weeks before the final submission deadline. It was a monumental task, one that would require a complete overhaul of the structural and electrical plans. David had promised him it would be done without even consulting me. That night, he called me into his glass-walled office. He didn't ask me if it was possible. He told me it was expected. "Olivia Harrison wants a new atrium," he said, not even bothering to look up from his computer. I told him we'd have it for him by the end of the month. "Make it happen." David, that's a 6-week job minimum, I replied, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. We'd have to re-coordinate with all the engineering teams. It impacts the foundation load. He finally looked up, his expression one of mild annoyance. That sounds like a technical problem. You're a technical expert. Solve it. He gave me that smile. You're my star player, Olivia. I know you won't let me down. And so, for the next 4 weeks, I barely left the office. I coordinated with Sarah and her team, pulling 18-hour days. We reworked every calculation, every blueprint, every single detail. I felt like a surgeon performing open-heart surgery on a skyscraper. The only person I saw more than my own reflection in the computer screen was Ben, a fresh-faced design assistant who had been assigned to help me. Ben was young, eager, and utterly out of his depth. He was good at fetching coffee and organizing files, but when it came to the complex software or the principles of structural integrity, he was lost. I found myself spending more time teaching him than he spent helping me. He seemed to shadow my every move, watching me work with an intensity that I initially mistook for admiration. Finally, after weeks of relentless effort, it was done. The new atrium design was not just good. It was brilliant. It was innovative, cost-effective, and aesthetically stunning. I had managed to pull a rabbit out of a hat, and I knew it was the best work of my career. I printed the final renderings and laid them out in the main conference room, the morning sun streaming in and glinting off the images of the magnificent glass ceiling I had designed. I felt a rare surge of triumph. This, I thought, this is what it's all for. David would have to acknowledge this. He would have to give me the credit I deserved. The day of the internal review for the new atrium design was supposed to be my moment. I had the presentation polished, the technical specifications detailed, and every potential question from the board anticipated. I had poured my soul into this, and I was ready to defend every line, every angle, every single choice I had made. Mr. Harrison's final approval was contingent on this internal sign-off, and everything was writing on it. I walked into the main conference room, feeling a nervous energy that was quickly replaced by confusion. David was already there, standing at the head of the table, my blueprints and renderings spread out before him as if they were his own. Ben was by his side, looking over his shoulder with a look of reverence. The other senior partners were filtering in, grabbing coffee, and David was greeting them with the easy charm of a man who had everything under control. He hadn't even waited for me. He saw me and gestured vaguely toward a chair at the far end of the table. Olivia good? Grab a seat. I'm just about to walk the partners through the final atrium concept. I was stunned into silence. He was going to present my work? Before I could formulate a protest, the meeting had started. I sat there, invisible, as David elegantly presented my design. He spoke with a fluency that was infuriating, using the very language I had used when I explained the complex structural solutions to him the day before. He took credit for the innovative use of sustainable materials, a feature I had spent months researching. He even explained the intricate lighting system as a stroke of genius he'd had late one night. Ben, my supposed assistant, occasionally chimed in, adding small, sycophantic comments like, "That was a brilliant solution you came up with." David. I felt a hot, sickening wave of anger wash over me. My name was not mentioned once. Not as a contributor, not as a team member, not even as the person who had physically created the documents they were looking at. The partners were impressed. There were murmurs of approval and appreciative nods. My design was a triumph, but the victory felt hollow, stolen. After the presentation, as the partners were leaving, I saw my chance to confront David, but before I could, I overheard a snippet of conversation between him and one of the senior partners, a man named Mr. Caldwell. "Incredible work." "David," Mr. Caldwell said, clapping him on the shoulder. Harrison is going to be ecstatic. You really pulled this one out of the fire. For a minute there, I was worried we have to push the deadline. David let out a low, confident chuckle. There was never any doubt. It's just a matter of managing the talent, keeping them motivated. Mr. Caldwell lowered his voice slightly, but my ears were ringing with adrenaline, and I heard every word clearly. That girl, Olivia. She's the one who did the heavy lifting on this, isn't she? She's a workhorse. David's reply was dismissive, almost contemptuous. He waved a hand in my general direction without even looking at me. She's a good technician, sure. Does what she's told. But a dime a dozen, really. These young, ambitious types, they burn bright, and then they burn out. I'm not worried about replacing her. I've got a new kid, Ben, who's already showing more promise. He's got the right attitude. He understands the business, a single careless whisper. That's all it was. But it hit me with the force of a physical blow. A dime a dozen. A good technician. Not worried about replacing me. The words echoed in my head, drowning out everything else. All the sleepless nights, the sacrificed weekends, the passion and creativity I had poured into my work, all of it was reduced to a dismissive, arrogant comment. He didn't see me as a creator, an architect, an artist. He saw me as a replaceable cog in his machine. And then, the clueless assistant I had been patiently mentoring was being groomed to take my place. It all clicked into place. Ben wasn't just watching me to learn. He was watching me to steal, to replicate, to become my cheaper, more pliable successor. I felt the floor drop out from beneath me. The rage was so intense it was almost clarifying. For years, I had told myself to be patient, to play the game, to wait for my turn. But in that moment, I understood that my turn was never going to come. David would continue to use me, to drain me of my creativity, and then, when I was no longer useful or when a cheaper option came along, he would discard me without a second thought. The loyalty I had shown to Sterling Designs, the respect I had for the work, meant nothing to him. I walked out of the conference room without a word. I went back to my desk, my hands trembling. I looked at the 3D model of the Elysian Grand on my screen, my masterpiece, my prison, and I made a decision. He wasn't worried about replacing me? Fine, I would show him and the entire firm just what it was they would be losing. The game had changed. It was no longer about getting credit. It was about taking control. My plan for revenge began to form, not as a burst of anger, but as a cool, calculated architectural design. It would have a solid foundation, a flawless structure, and a breathtaking, unforgettable facade. Asterisk, the week following David's careless whisper was a masterclass in self-control. On the outside, I was the same dedicated Olivia. I smiled in meetings, I nodded when David gave instructions, and I even offered to help Ben with some of the software he was struggling with. He was my replacement, after all. It was only fair that I made sure he was properly trained. But on the inside, a quiet, cold fury was fueling a meticulous investigation. My revenge couldn't be a simple, emotional outburst. It had to be strategic, undeniable, and devastating. It had to be a work of architecture in itself, elegant, precise, and built on a foundation of truth that could withstand any scrutiny. David had made one critical mistake. He underestimated me. He saw me as a technician, a pair of hands that executed his vision. He forgot that those hands had built the very digital infrastructure of the Elysian Grand project from the ground up. I knew its servers, its file-sharing protocols, and its hidden-away data logs better than anyone. I was the one who had set up the permissions and the access levels. And while David was the face of the project, he was technically clumsy. He relied on me for everything, from finding a specific file to resetting his password. This reliance was the first crack in his polished facade, and I intended to exploit it fully. My search began not with hacking or any kind of illicit activity, but with simple, diligent archaeology. I started digging through the project's digital archives, going back years. Every project at Sterling Designs had a master server where all communications, drafts, and file transfers were logged. It was a digital paper trail, and I knew David was too arrogant and too lazy to ever cover his tracks. I started my work after hours when the office was quiet and the only sound was the hum of the servers. I told security I was running final diagnostics on the Elision project files, which was technically true. My first breakthrough came from the initial proposal phase of the project. Nearly 3 years prior, Mr. Harrison had been courted by several top firms. I found the initial pitch documents that Sterling Designs had submitted. Buried deep within the metadata of the preliminary design concepts David had presented as his own, I found the name of a freelance architectural consultant, Julian Croft. I had never heard of him. A quick search revealed that Julian was a brilliant but obscure designer who had a reputation for selling incredible concept art to larger firms without asking for public credit. For a hefty price, I cross-referenced Julian's name with the firm's accounting records, which I had legitimate access to as a senior project lead. And there it was, a series of large, vaguely labeled payments made to a shell corporation. The payments were authorized by David, classified under external consultation fees. The dates of the payments lined up perfectly with the early stages of the Elision Grand Proposal. David hadn't just taken credit for my work. His entire vision for the project, the very core concept that had won over Mr. Harrison, had been bought from someone else. He had passed it off as his own genius, and the firm had celebrated him for it. This was more than just plagiarism. It was a fundamental deception that had formed the very foundation of his career at the firm. This discovery was the cornerstone of my plan, but I needed more. I needed to show a pattern of behavior. I widened my search, looking into other major projects David had led over the past 5 years. And the pattern was there, clear as day. For every award-winning project, there was a ghost designer, a series of suspicious payments, and David's name front and center. He was a fraud, a curator of other people's brilliance, a man who had built his entire reputation on a lie. The final piece of the puzzle fell into my lap in the most unexpected way. I was helping Ben format a presentation, a menial task David had assigned me. As I was cleaning up the file on the shared server, I noticed a folder that was accidentally made public. It was labeled personal. My heart pounded. I knew it was a risk, but I couldn't resist. Inside, I found a trove of emails. It seemed David had been careless, dragging personal folders into the project directory. One email chain in particular caught my eye. It was between David and a senior executive at a rival firm, a company we had recently underbid for a major city contract. The emails were damning. David was complaining about his bonus at Sterling Designs, and the executive from the rival firm was sympathetic. The conversation quickly turned to the city contract. David had shared confidential information about our firm's bid, our budget, our timeline, our unique selling propositions. He was leaking proprietary information to a competitor, likely in the hopes of leveraging a better job offer. He was not only a fraud and a plagiarist, he was a traitor to the company he claimed to lead. I meticulously and anonymously copied every piece of evidence. The payment records, the email chains, the metadata from the original design files. I compiled it all into a secure, encrypted file, a digital blueprint of David's deceit. I felt a grim satisfaction as I worked. He had called me a technician. He was right. And this technician was about to deconstruct his entire life. Asterisk with the evidence secured. My plan shifted from investigation to strategic implementation. I couldn't just dump the information anonymously. That would be chaotic and unprofessional. My revenge needed to be a performance, a public unveiling. It needed to happen in a forum where the impact would be maximal, where David's humiliation would be witnessed by the very people whose respect he craved the most. The final presentation to Mr. Harrison was in 2 weeks. It was the perfect stage dot. My first move was to solidify my alliance with Sarah. She was more than just a friend. She was a highly respected engineer whose opinion carried weight. I invited her for a coffee away from the prying eyes of the office. I laid out everything I had found, showing her the proof on a secure tablet. I saw her expression shift from concerned curiosity to shock, and then to a steely resolve that mirrored my own. I always knew he was a snake. "Olivia," she said, her voice low and furious, "I can't tell you how many times he's called my team, demanding impossible changes and then blaming us when things get delayed. He talks a good game, but he doesn't understand the first thing about structural integrity." Her validation was empowering, but I needed more than just her moral support. "Sarah, I need your help," I said. "For this to work, I need to present an alternative, a better one. My plan is to show Mr. Harrison what the Elysian Grand could be, without David's fraudulent foundation." Sarah's eyes lit up with a conspiratorial gleam. "What do you have in mind?" I explained my idea. Over the years, I had developed dozens of innovative concepts for the Elysian that David had dismissed as too risky or not on brand. In other words, ideas he couldn't easily explain or take credit for. I wanted to secretly develop a new, refined proposal for the Elysian Grand. This version wouldn't just be an aesthetic improvement. It would be a feat of engineering and sustainability, incorporating cutting-edge technologies that would make the hotel a true landmark of the 21st century. It would be my vision, untainted by David's influence. And crucially, thanks to some clever engineering solutions Sarah and I had discussed in the past, it would also be significantly more cost-effective to build. It will be impossible to do this alone in 2 weeks, I admitted. Sarah smiled. "You won't be alone." For the next 10 days, we worked in secret, a covert team operating in the shadows of the corporate world. Sarah brought in 2 of her most trusted junior engineers who were loyal to her and tired of David's incompetence. We used Sarah's firm's servers to collaborate, working late into the night, fueled by a shared sense of purpose and a desire for justice. We were a guerrilla architectural firm designing a revolution. We re-engineered the building's energy systems, incorporating a geothermal heating and cooling loop that would cut the hotel's carbon footprint by 60%. We redesigned the support structure using a new composite material that was lighter, stronger, and cheaper than the conventional steel David had insisted on. My new atrium design, the one David had stolen, became the centerpiece of an even grander vision, with a retractable glass roof and integrated rainwater harvesting system, while the official Elysian project was being finalized by Ben under David's clueless supervision. My secret project was taking shape. I was careful to maintain my cover at work. I dutifully helped Ben with his tasks, answering his questions and offering advice, all the while knowing that the presentation he was helping to prepare was a dead man walking. He was so proud of the work, so eager to please David. I felt a pang of pity for him. He was just a pawn in a much larger game, another young, ambitious person being used by a man who cared for no one but himself. My final move was to connect the dots for the key players. I needed to ensure that when the time came, the right people would be paying attention. 3 days before the final presentation, I sent out 2 anonymous, encrypted packages. The first was to Mr. Caldwell, the senior partner who had dismissed me as a workhorse. Inside, I provided a concise, professional summary of David's plagiarism, focusing on the financial and reputational risk to the firm. I included the payment records to the Shell Corporation and the metadata from Julian Croft's original designs. I framed it not as a personal grievance, but as a serious breach of corporate ethics that could jeopardize the firm's integrity. The second package was for Mr. Harrison. This one was different. It didn't mention David's fraud. Instead, it was a teaser, a single stunning rendering of my new design for the Elysian Grand's entrance, with a simple, unsigned note: the future of the Elysian Grand, a more innovative, more sustainable, and more cost-effective vision. Full details to be revealed at the final presentation. It was a bold, risky move, designed to pique the interest of a man who prided himself on being a visionary. I was baiting the hook, gambling that his curiosity would outweigh his loyalty to David. The stage was set. The players were in position. The blueprints for David's downfall were complete. All that was left was the final performance. Asterisk, the day of the presentation arrived with a palpable tension in the air. The main boardroom at Sterling Designs was prepared for a king. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the city skyline, and at its head was a throne-like chair for Mr. Harrison. David was in his element, pacing the room with a confident swagger, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. He was schmoozing with the firm's partners, including a very grim-faced Mr. Caldwell, who avoided making eye contact with him. Ben was scurrying around, checking the projector and arranging presentation boards, his face a mixture of excitement and raw nerves. I took my seat at the side of the room, a deliberate choice to make myself inconspicuous. I was just the technician, after all. Mr. Harrison arrived precisely on time, an imposing figure with an aura of immense wealth and zero patience. He greeted David with a firm handshake, but his eyes, I noticed, were scanning the room with an unusual intensity. He seemed distracted, almost impatient. I knew he had received my package. The bait was taken. David launched into his presentation with his usual theatrical flair. He spoke of his vision of the journey he had taken to bring the Elysian Grand to life. He used words like legacy, iconic, and masterpiece. He clicked through the slides, showcasing the designs I had bled for. I watched him, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of detached fascination. He was like an actor playing the role of a great architect, unaware that the stage was about to collapse beneath him. He presented the new atrium design with particular pride. "And here," he said, his voice booming with false modesty, "is the solution to the final challenge Mr. Harrison set for us. A space that is both grand and intimate, a testament to modern engineering." Mr. Harrison listened impassively, his fingers steepled before him. He didn't seem as impressed as the partners had been. When David finished, there was a polite smattering of applause. "Thank you, David," Mr. Harrison said, his voice flat. "An adequate proposal." "Adequate?" David's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Mr. Harrison, this is more than adequate. This is the design that will set a new standard for luxury. Asterisk." Mr. Harrison picked up a single sheet of paper from the table in front of him. It was the rendering I had sent him. He held it up. "Is it? Because a few days ago, I received this. It suggests a different standard." The room went silent. David stared at the rendering, his face a mask of confusion. I don't know what that is," he stammered. "Some kind of speculative marketing?" "It came with a note," Mr. Harrison continued, his gaze sweeping across the room until it landed on me. "It said the full details would be revealed today. Does anyone know anything about this?" All eyes turned to me. I could feel David's glare, hot and furious. Mr. Caldwell was watching me with a new, calculating expression. This was my moment. I took a deep breath, stood up, and walked to the front of the room. "I do. Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice clear and steady. "My name is Olivia. I am the senior architectural designer for the Elysian Grand. That rendering is part of a comprehensive counterproposal I have prepared for your consideration." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. David looked as if he had been struck by lightning. Olivia, what is the meaning of this? This is highly unprofessional. Sit down. I ignored him. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and walked to the podium. With all due respect to Mr. Chun, I said, making direct eye contact with Mr. Harrison, the proposal you just saw is not the best we can do. It is not the most innovative, nor the most cost-effective. It is simply the one you were presented with. I believe you and this city deserve better. I plugged the flash drive into the laptop. Then, looking utterly bewildered, stepped aside. On the screen, my presentation loaded. The title slide was simple: The Elysian Grand, A New Vision, by Olivia. For the past 2 years, I have been the lead designer on this project. I began, my voice filled with a confidence I didn't know I possessed. And in that time, I have identified numerous opportunities for improvement, for innovation that were unfortunately overlooked. This counter-proposal is the culmination of that work, asterisk. For the next 20 minutes, I held the room captive. I didn't just present a design. I told a story. I walked them through the geothermal energy system, the advanced composite materials, the rainwater harvesting. I showed them financial projections prepared with the help of Sarah's team that demonstrated a 15% reduction in construction costs and a 40% reduction in long-term operating expenses. I showed them a building that was not just beautiful, but intelligent, responsible, and truly groundbreaking. When I finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Mr. Harrison was staring at the screen, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. He looked like a man who had just been shown the future. David, however, was sputtering with rage. This is an ambush. This is insubordination. She did this behind my back. None of this has been vetted or approved. On the contrary, a new voice cut in. It was Mr. Caldwell. He stood up, holding a file. I took the liberty of reviewing some project files recently. It appears that the original concept for this project, the one Mr. Chun has taken credit for all these years, was not his at all. It was purchased from a freelancer. It seems, Mr. Harrison, that our firm owes its biggest contract to a man named Julian Croft. The color drained from David's face. He was exposed, his foundation crumbling before his very eyes. The fraud, the lies, the years of deception all laid bare in a matter of minutes. He looked around the room, searching for an ally, but found only cold, disappointed stares. The boardroom had transformed from a space of corporate presentation into a courtroom, and David Chen was on trial. He stood frozen, his confident facade shattered, revealing the desperate, hollow man beneath. He looked from Mr. Caldwell's accusatory gaze to Mr. Harrison's intrigued smile, and finally to me, his eyes filled with a venomous hatred. "This is a conspiracy," he hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She's a disgruntled employee. She's working with our competitors." Mr. Harrison held up a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Chun, please. The only thing I am interested in right now is the best possible building for my money. Let's not distract ourselves with office politics." His eyes, sharp and discerning, turned back to me. "Ms. Olivia," he said, and the use of my name, the respect in his tone, felt like a victory in itself. "Your design is compelling. The cost savings alone are significant. But innovation carries risk. How can I be sure that these new materials, these systems you're proposing, are viable?" This was the question I had been waiting for. This was the moment that would separate my proposal from a mere fantasy. It was time for my final pitch, the one that would secure not just the project, but my future. "That is an excellent question, Mr. Harrison," I replied calmly. "And I would never ask you to invest in a vision without proof of its structural integrity." I clicked to the next slide. It showed a picture of Sarah. This is Sarah, the lead engineer from Tecton Group, our structural engineering partners on this project. She and her team have been working with me on this counterproposal for the past 2 weeks. They have run every simulation, every stress test, and every calculation. The design is not just viable, it is in many ways superior in strength and resilience to the original plan. As if on cue, the conference room door opened and Sarah walked in. She carried a tablet and radiated an aura of quiet, uncheckable competence. She had been waiting in the lobby, my ace in the hole. "Mr. Harrison, gentlemen," Sarah said, nodding to the board. "My team has independently vetted every aspect of Olivia's revised design. The composite materials she has proposed are already in use in aerospace engineering and are 30% lighter and 50% stronger than the steel framework in the current plans. The geothermal system is based on a model that has been successfully implemented in several large-scale projects in Scandinavia. There's no risk here, only forward-thinking, intelligent design." She handed her tablet to Mr. Harrison. It displayed the results of the structural stress tests. Elegant, color-coded graphics that showed my building withstanding simulated earthquakes and hurricane-force winds with ease. David watched this, his last hope draining away. He had been outmaneuvered at every turn. He had relied on his charm and his stolen ideas for so long that he had forgotten what it was to face real rigorous scrutiny. He was an empty suit, and the room could now see it. Mr. Harrison swiped through the data on the tablet, his expression growing more and more impressed. He looked up first at Sarah, then at me. "You two did all of this in 2 weeks?" "We did, sir," I said. Imagine what we could do with the proper resources and support. That was the final blow. I wasn't just offering him a building. I was offering him a team, a partnership built on genuine talent and collaboration. Everything David pretended to be. We actually were. Mr. Harrison placed the tablet firmly on the table. He stood up and looked directly at Mr. Caldwell and the other partners. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument, "I want this design, and I want Ms. Olivia to lead the project. Effective immediately. My team will draw up a new contract. We will be working directly with her and her chosen engineers. As for you, Mr. Chun," he said, turning to David with a look of utter disdain, "your services are no longer required on my project. I trust Sterling Designs will handle the ... internal restructuring." He then walked over to me and extended his hand. "Congratulations, young lady," he said, his handshake firm. "You have not only designed a masterpiece, you have shown me that true vision is not about who is in charge, but who has the best ideas. I look forward to building this with you." I shook his hand, a wave of elation washing over me. It was done. It had worked better than I could have ever imagined. I had not only exposed a fraud and saved my career, I had won the project of a lifetime on my own terms. Asterisk, the aftermath of the presentation was swift and brutal. As Mr. Harrison and Sarah left the boardroom to discuss the new contract, the atmosphere shifted from tense to funereal. David Chun stood alone, a pariah in the room he had once commanded. The partners, led by Mr. Caldwell, closed in on him. I didn't stay to watch the execution. I didn't need to. I simply gathered my things and walked out, leaving the wreckage of David's career behind me. Later that afternoon, an email went out to the entire company from the board of directors. It announced David Chun's immediate resignation for personal reasons. There was no farewell party, no graceful exit. He was simply gone, erased from the corporate structure as cleanly as a deleted file. The news of what had actually happened spread through the office like wildfire. People spoke in hushed tones in the hallways, glancing at me with a newfound respect and a little bit of fear. I was no longer the quiet workhorse. I was the woman who had taken down the head of operations. The next day, Mr. Caldwell called me into his office. He looked tired, but he offered me a genuine smile. "Olivia," he said, "I owe you an apology." "And a thank you." You exposed a rot in this firm that we should have seen years ago. You did something that took immense courage. He then offered me David's job, head of operations. I was momentarily stunned. It was everything I thought I had wanted, a validation of all my hard work. But as I looked around the glass-walled office, I realized I didn't want it. I didn't want to be the person who managed other people's talent. I wanted to be the talent. I wanted to build things. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell, I said, my voice firm. But I'm going to have to decline. Mr. Harrison has made me a very generous offer. He's providing the seed funding for me to start my own design firm with the Elysian Grand as our first official project. Sarah is joining me as a founding partner. Mr. Caldwell looked surprised, but he nodded slowly, a look of understanding on his face. I can't say I blame you, he said. You've earned it. We were lucky to have you for as long as we did. I handed him my letter of resignation. It was a simple one-sentence document. It felt liberating. I cleaned out my desk, the place where I had spent countless nights and weekends. Ben came over, his face pale. Olivia, he stammered. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I looked at him, and the last vestiges of my anger melted away. He was just a kid, caught in the crossfire. It's not your fault, Ben, I told him. You were just doing what you thought you had to do to get ahead. A piece of advice? Don't be like him. Let your work speak for you. It's a longer, harder path, but it's the only one that's real. He nodded, looking humbled. Are you really starting your own firm? I am, I said with a smile. And we'll be hiring in a few months. Send me your portfolio when you're ready. Leaving Sterling Designs felt like stepping out of a shadow and into the sun. The empty chair David left behind was not a void, but an opportunity for the firm to rebuild with integrity and for me to build something entirely my own. My new office, which Sarah and I leased a few weeks later, was a bright, open-plan space with a view of the construction site where the Elysian Grand would soon rise. Our firm, which we named Nexus Architecture, was founded on a simple principle: collaboration over ego, innovation over imitation, and a belief that good ideas, no matter where they come from, deserve to be heard. My revenge was complete. But it had become something more than that. It wasn't just about tearing someone down. It was about building something better in its place. David Chun had called me a dime a dozen, a replaceable technician. He thought he could replace me without a second thought. And in the end, he was right. He did replace me. He replaced me with a CEO,